Hierarchy of needs.
Welcome to a pivotal moment in the world of broadcast as we proudly present the Men's Mental Health Show featuring the renowned Larry Mabry in collaboration with the Maassen Group. This central exploration of men's mental health wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of Rainier Avenue Radio World. Now, let's dive into this crucial conversation with Larry Mabry and the Maassen Group. Your mental well-being matters. Here's Larry Mabry.
Hey, welcome. How's everyone doing on this beautiful Monday at 5:30 p.m.? I would say the Monday just before we roll into our holiday season. I wanted to say thank you, appreciate those individuals that are participating. Just want to say hello. I wanted to send a shout out to our sponsors here at Rainier Avenue Radio World. Appreciate their support, as well as the Maassen Group. Also wanted to put a shout out to School, South King Emotional Wellness League. Wanted to say thank you for those individuals that are looking for mental health support. You can reach out to School and we can support you there. So today's topic, we're going to be looking at conflict resolution. Before we go into it, I was talking to a friend of mine about that. And we think to ourselves, are conflicts important? And sometimes actually, believe it or not, conflicts actually have some benefits to it. So let me give you a scenario. So let's say that you wake up one day, get out of your bed, nice warm bed, step over the side of the bed, put your house shoes on, get situated, everything is cool. But then you notice that the floor is cold. You got a conflict because maybe you're used to having a warm floor. So what does that tell you? Well, first thing, you're like, wait a minute, why is the floor cold? And you might say, okay, notice that I turned on the heat the night before, but when I stepped out of the bed today, I noticed that it was cold. So you may say, okay, what do I do in this situation? Well, first of all, that conflict has you put you in a situation where you have to say, I need to do something different. So it causes you to check the furnace, check the vents, make sure everything's okay. Let's say that things aren't. Let's say that there's a problem. Well, that conflict actually forces you to make a different change, right? To make a change. So what do? Well, you go downstairs, you check the thermostat, check the flame, make sure that's okay. And you realize, oh, you know what? It got blew out. If you know how to do it, for those old school people, you can actually light it, the pilot light, depending on the furnace, light it back up. Once you light it back up, maybe turn the thermostat down, fire it back up, and you realize, I'm okay. I got out of that conflict, right? Heat up the house, you're good to go. And sometimes people are like, well, man, I don't really want to deal with conflict. But there's some advantages to having conflict because if you have a challenge, it forces you to do one first thing. Stop and say, wait a minute, maybe what I'm doing right now needs to change, right? So in that scenario, jumped out of bed, you realize, oh, it was cold. I need to change the direction, okay? So now you go downstairs, you see the problem, you handle it, no problem. Okay, you might say, okay, well, why is he talking about conflict? Well, today, I wanted to give you guys a quiz for those individuals that are interested, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat. All right, in the chat, I put a quiz for those individuals that are curious to see, and that quiz basically has your conflict style, okay? We have 5 particular styles of conflict whenever we deal with situations that are very challenging. All right. Okay. So now, before we go into it, I'm going to give you guys some time to go ahead and click on the style, right? And as you click on the style, a couple things I want to cover. Whenever we have conflict, ask yourself, in general, are you running away from something very hard that you have to face and do? Conflicts kind of force you to look at that. Then you have to ask yourself, is it time to face that thing that you're running from? Right? And I give you a scenario. So for me personally, I noticed that if the health thing is something I've been really working on for myself, and I like to be transparent. And today I had the opportunity to kick it with some very, very cool brothers. And one brother mentioned something to another individual, and it just got me thinking. And he gave a really good suggestion as far as some health things that we should need to work on. And within myself, I noticed I had a conflict. And so I'm going to kind of go through these questions. What was I running from? Why was I struggling with the particular thing that he suggested? And the first thing came to mind was, well, a lot of times we just resist. As soon as the conflict comes up, we just stop, we resist. Nope, I don't want to do it. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And I asked myself, okay, why is it hard for me to face this? I had to really be honest with myself. Why am I struggling with this conflict? Why is it hard for me to face it? And then I'm like, okay, is it time for me to face that thing? And as I sat with myself, I noticed I had this internal dialogue, and I was like, you know what? He's right. Let me try something different. And he was actually talking to the other gentleman, and I'm like, you know what? He's right, because I was listening. And within myself, I said, I need to do something different. So when you have these conflicts and you notice that you have these internal battles, try to take like one thing that you can kind of connect to, right? Because whenever we make changes, it's challenging in the beginning. So try to take one thing and be honest with yourself to transition that conflict. Okay. Be grateful for those experiences that cause us to grow. Because actually, if you think about it, life is always about contrast. Contrast. Okay. Feeling grateful when we're lacking in confidence, a lot of times conflict kind of allows us to see that situation. Okay. It's better to see something, have that conflict, and push through it, which actually lets us know that we actually have the courage to kind of transition through that situation. But the conflicts actually tell us and help us push through that. All right, so let's move on. So now we're going to look at the 5 types of conflict styles. All right, the first conflict is, first of all, to define conflict, it's basically the condition in which 2 or more individual concerns appear to be incompatible. We call that the conflict. Conflict is a natural and healthy part of the human personal and professional relationships. We always have conflict. The question is, how do we deal with it? If we look in nature, we notice that there's conflicts, but how do they deal with it? Conflicts become unhealthy when it is handled in an unproductive manner. So think about how things work in nature. So what we're going to talk about now is the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. For those individuals that can see me online, at the base of the model, you'll see the cooperativeness, and up and down, I would say call that the y-axis and the x-axis. So in the y-axis, you see assertiveness. And if you look along the model, you'll see the first step we have is avoiding. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And then you go up, you'll see competing. In the middle, you'll see compromising. And then to the far right, you'll see collaborating. And then at the far bottom to the right, you'll see accommodating. If you notice, at the base, it says cooperativeness. And so our goal, first of all, we don't really want to judge any of these particular conflicts because all of them actually may be important depending on what you're going through. Okay. They're all important because at some point, if you have somebody who's very hostile, you might need to avoid them, right? If you have a situation where maybe someone wants to take your life or imminent danger, boom, just avoid in that situation. Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay. No problem. All right, so we're going to go to assertiveness. Okay. Assertiveness is a degree to which you try to satisfy your own concerns during a conflict. So think about a time when maybe you were being assertive. Hey, what's going on, Rocky? How are you? Good to see you. Welcome to the show. If you want to comment, go ahead. Feel free to comment. Think about a time that you felt that you were being assertive. You can write that in there. No problem. All right. Then the next one is cooperativeness. Cooperativeness is the degree to which you try to satisfy the other individual's concerns during the conflict. So that might be a situation where you're trying to kind of understand where the person's coming from. You're trying to cooperate to see where they're at, trying to kind of meet them at their level, but at the same time, kind of get what you are. We call that negotiating. Okay. Next one. Let's see. All right. No problem. Oh, that might have been me. Okay. All right. Then we have something called competing. Okay. When we compete, basically, it's our way or the highway. And for those individuals that can see here, I have a shark. What does a shark do? Does a shark really compromise? No. It basically has the might makes right approach, right? So it's assertive, uncooperative, it's power oriented mode to win his or her position, standing up for your rights, defending position that you believe is correct, and the ulterior motive in that situation is just to win at all costs. All right. Now let's talk about the benefits of competing. Well, it requires you to make an unpopular decision. So, for example, if you're working for a company and you have to make budget cuts, sometimes you just have to boom. It is what it is based on the black and white situation. Sometimes you might have to terminate employment or kind of deal with the heavy lifting that other people may not feel comfortable with. And also, it may be beneficial in emergency situations. So I'm sure during the pandemic, a lot of people felt that, right? Based on being suggestively asked to take certain things that maybe they didn't feel comfortable with. Okay. But because the time of being of the essence, we go into what we call the competitive mode. All right. Okay. The cost or cons. Well, whenever we're in the competitive mode, what ends up happening is it strains the work relationships, right? It also decreases the initiative or motivation of the people you work around, right? Because sometimes just basically winning or losing, there's someone doesn't want to feel like they lost. So everyone's particular perspective is not really taken into account, and that kind of strains the relationship. Okay, let's move on. Now we're going to look into what we call collaboration or collaborating. And for those people that are here, you can see we have the owl. You notice the owl's head can turn 360 degrees. So you want to kind of work together with individuals. Okay. So with collaborating, basically, we're looking at the two heads are better than one approach. You work to find a solution that fully satisfies both concerns of the both individuals or both parties. You learn from others' insight and you try to find a creative solution. Okay. And let's look at the benefits. Well, typically when you're collaborating, you have high quality decisions. You create learning situations and communication. It actually strengthens the relationships, right? With collaboration. You feel like your voice is being heard. Now, let's talk about the costs or the cons. Well, with collaboration, unfortunately, it does take a lot of time and energy. And if you're anything like me, sometimes that can be tough. So I'm sure there might be individuals out here that have tight schedules. We're working with families, working with their businesses, working with different organizations. So sometimes that can be tough. However, it's very, very beneficial to put the time and energy required to collaborate. But it does take time and energy to do it. Also, the psychological demands. So you have to be open to different points of view, which allows you to grow as well. Okay, great. Let's move to the next one. So now we're going to look at the third one, which is compromising. And for those individuals that are taking a look, you notice we have the fox. Some people may say, well, he's sly as a fox. And there are actually some skills that are very necessary to compromise, right? Because you have to kind of think creatively, think outside the box sometimes. All right. So when we're compromising, sometimes we have to split the difference. And that means we have to find an expedient or mutual acceptable solution that partially satisfies both parties. It's best suited for issues of intermediate importance when we compromise. And now let's look at the benefits. So one of the benefits of compromising is it creates speed and in the expediency efficiency. Let's say that. Also, when we compromise, we create fairness in the relationship. And also, what happens is when we feel like we're meeting halfway, we feel like we're maintaining a relationship, right? Basically, you kind of you look out for me, I look out for you. You kind of work together. Everyone feels like they're kind of working together in that situation. All right. Okay, let's look at the costs or the what I would call the cons of compromising. Suboptimal decisions. So sometimes when you compromise, you may make a choice, but you feel like you kind of did it to kind of go with the group, but it may not be something you feel comfortable with, but you kind of did it to kind of make things flow. Unfortunately, partially you do sacrifice some of your concerns. And so sometimes it's like a give and take type of situation. So there are some cons to that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Avoiding. If you notice, we have the turtle here. For those individuals that can see, we have the turtle in the shell. And sometimes it's necessary, right? If you have a person who's very hostile, or maybe their communication style is not in alignment with yours, sometimes you have to kind of avoid that situation, the process, and maybe come back a little bit later. All right. So when we avoid, we basically leave well enough alone. And an individual does not pursue his or her own concerns or those of the other person. It doesn't really actually address the conflict. So sometimes we have to sidestep or postpone or withdraw. And I want to talk about this sometimes because sometimes you might need time to process a situation. And then later you can kind of come back and maybe use one of the other skills, especially if emotions are high. That's another thing too. Whenever we're using these particular models, I definitely recommend that we're trying to be as calm as possible. But sometimes, depending on where people's emotions are, that might be tough to do. Okay. All right. The benefits of avoiding. Well, one, definitely reducing stress, for at least for that time being, right? Because if somebody's hostile or they're all in your face, or aggressive, you can feel that energy, right? And you don't really want to get yourself in a situation where, you got a case or there's an altercation. So you might want to say, you know what, let me kind of back down for this situation now, and I'll come back and handle it a little bit later. Also, you kind of steer clear of danger, right? But also it sets up for more favorable conditions, right? Because sometimes when people are hostile, you might need to step away, process, like I said earlier, and then maybe later on, because you might need to communicate with other people to get other resources and that support so that you can handle that and make it more favorable for everyone involved. Okay. All right, cool. Let's look at the cons or the costs. Well, if you avoid repeatedly, it can actually decline the working relationships, right? Also, it can create resentment or delays or degrading decisions, right? So when doing that, it's important to kind of step back and kind of handle the situation to the best of your ability, or ask somebody else to kind of support you with that. Okay. All right, cool. So now we're going to look at accommodation. All right. So we notice we got the nice little huggy teddy bear there. You have that friend who they're able to kind of work with you and create situations that I like to call it win-win situations as much as possible. All right. And when we are accommodating, we're basically killing our enemies with kindness, right? Individual neglects his or her own concerns to satisfy the concerns of the other person. Sometimes it can be self-sacrificing or yielding to another's point of view. Okay. And the benefits of accommodating. Well, one benefit is it restores harmony in building relationships. You create or choose a quick ending to try to mitigate or get through that situation quickly so that you can kind of move to the next situation, right? All right. And then the cons. Well, there are some costs or cons with accommodating. Sometimes you may sacrifice your concerns to accommodate somebody else. Sometimes you can create a situation where you lose respect either for yourself or that other person, right? You could lose motivation. Okay. So it's important to remember as we look at all these particular conflict models that we use them all in different situations. But we also want to make sure that we're being respectful of each one as we go through them. Okay. And each of us is capable of using all 5 conflict styles. And we use some better than others and therefore tend to rely on these styles. Okay. All right. So let's look at this. So we notice we have 5 conflict styles here. Hopefully you can remember. I kind of cheated and I kind of set it up there for you. But what is your primary conflict style and why? So for those individuals that are out there, if you're online, I'd like for you to kind of comment, which style do you pretty much use? Okay. Hopefully we have some people take the quiz. Again, we use all of these. I noticed for me, I would say I pretty much use the compromise, accommodation, and the avoiding and collaborating more so than competing. Certain situations, if I have clients that are very angry, I might have to be very careful with what I communicate so that we don't excite the situation. Eventually kind of go through this process, right? To kind of get people to the point where they are compromising or collaborating. Okay. So I'm curious to see. Again, we have all of these. And if you were able to go through the quiz, you should see where you are. I think for me, I felt, and because there's a percentage that it gives you, I think most of mine was compromising and accommodation. So, but I'm curious to see which one you were. And then why? Why would you be in that one? Okay. So, quick question. Which conflict style would you like to grow in and why and how? So think about that. So what we covered today, some of this you may have known, some of it may be new information. So think about what we covered. Which conflict style would you like to grow in and why and how? How could you grow in that area? Okay. Have any questions? Feel free to reach out. And I want to kind of recap again real quick. Wanted to say thank you so much for those individuals that were looking out here at Rainier Avenue Radio World. I want to say thank you so much for that. Those individuals too, I did hear some people comment about possibly having question and answers where we pose a question and people call in and we actually have like a live talk type situation. So those individuals that are interested, if you're online, shout out, say, hey, we want to do it. Also too, we did hear some comments regarding the name, and I believe I heard Mabry Moment was the majority of what people decided to do. I did hear Larry's Lessons, but the majority I heard was Mabry Moments, where people basically call in and kind of voice out some concerns they have in the community as it deals with mental health. But hey, reach out, let me know what you think. Okay. All right, cool. One other thing too I want to talk about too is going back to the conflicts, right? A lot of times people say, oh, this particular, had one client say, oh, when you compete, it's bad. Well, I would not so much say it's bad, because think about sports, right? There are some benefits to competing. I would just suggest that make sure that we realize that it's a game. So, for example, if we're playing a sport and we're competing, let's have fun out in the game. But after we're done with the game, let's make sure that we honor and respect each other as people. And I think sometimes that's where it can kind of get a little bit convoluted, where someone may win a game and then they take it off the field, and then they become more power. Well, I'm better than you and that type of thing. Well, you're good at that game, but we want to work on making sure we cultivate the relationship and realize, well, hey, the game is there, but the relationship is here. So let's make sure we honor that relationship. Okay. That's one thing I wanted to kind of talk about with that. Another thing too, someone talked about the accommodating. I want to talk a little bit about that too, because we looked at the accommodation and talked about sacrificing concerns. And sometimes, again, depending on that situation, we may need to do that, but then we might need to kind of come back, right? Because some people say, oh, well, I don't want to be kind. Well, sometimes you have to kind of let people get their voice out, to create that space, and then kind of come back and kind of readdress some things, right? Because whenever you're communicating, it's always like a give and take type of situation. Okay. So thanks again, guys. I just want to say I appreciate you guys tuning in today. for our men's mental health. For those individuals who reached out, want to say hello. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys. Also want to share, if you could share what you learned about these conflicts today. And what conflicts are you? So think about it. If you want to share now, let us know what conflict do you notice that you typically grapple with, right? And then how could you work through those conflicts to be a better person? Okay. So as we wrap it up, I want to say our next particular speaker will be Dr. Tracy Harrell with a Better Together and Living Powerfully. So make sure you guys tune into her and have fun. Also, too, next week I would like to cover Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that might be something that we can address next week. And also feel free to reach out and share what are some things that you guys would like to see as far as calling in. One concern someone spoke to me about was depression. Let me know if that's something that you guys want to talk about. Another concern someone reached out to me about was self-esteem. But hey, feel free to reach out and say, hey, you know what, Larry, we'd like for you to cover this. Or if you just want to say, hey, I just want to talk about kind of what's going on in the community and kind of how I'm dealing with certain things with that. So feel free to reach out. Once again, I want to say thank you guys for reaching out here on the Men's Mental Health Show. And looking forward to seeing you guys next week. I believe we will probably be connected next week, same time. Yes? Okay, perfect. All right, cool. So again, want to say thanks again for tuning in. Our next individual will be Dr. Tracy Harrell, and she'll be talking about Better Together and Living Powerfully. And I'll be seeing you guys roll in next week about the same time. You guys have a good one. Peace and love and deuces.